Pokemon is everywhere, and it seems like it has been for well over 20 years now. The newest games in the series, Pokemon Sword and Shield, recently came out for the Nintendo Switch, and though they are by far the most controversial games in the series, they are still selling like hotcakes. The long-running Pokemon anime series is also still going, and as for the Pokemon trading card game, people still gather at a few local game and card shops around me every Sunday just to, well, trade and play the game. Oh, and apparently there's gonna be a Pokemon-themed pop-up bar in Seattle next year. I'm definitely gonna have to go down to the States to check that out. But today, I'm not gonna be talking about modern Pokemon, even if I do have a lot of thoughts about Pokemon Sword and Shield, thoughts that aren't necessarily all positive. No, today I'm going back nearly a decade, oh god I feel old, to the year 2011, to talk about a game that's a part of my favorite Pokemon generation, Generation 5. Now, Gen 5 includes Pokemon Black and White versions and their sequels, Pokemon Black and White version 2. All of those are fantastic games I'd highly recommend, especially Black and White version 2. Seriously, those games are my favorite games in the entire Pokemon series. But of course, with mainline Pokemon games comes, inevitably, Pokemon spin-offs. In this generation alone, we saw spin-offs such as Pokemon Rumble Blast, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Gates to Infinity, Pokédex 3D Pro, and in 2011, Japan got this, Battle and Get Pokemon Typing for the Nintendo DS. Now, what's really cool about this game is that it actually reminds me a lot of one of my favorite Sega Dreamcast games.
The Typing of the Dead.
Now, okay, there have been other games that try to teach you how to type besides the Typing of the Dead, but that's one that I always think of, and it's one that I find myself coming back to at least a few times a year. Anyways, Battle and Get Pokemon Typing would later be localized in Europe and Australia as Learn With Pokémon Typing Adventure. For our sake, I'm just going to be referring to this as Pokemon Typing Adventure. And a bit of a funny twist, due to coming out so close to the launch of the 3DS, some ads in Australia outright marketed this game as a 3DS game. Despite that though, this is still just a DS game. And though like most DS games, it will work on a 3DS, it doesn't really get any added perks or anything if you play it on a 3DS. You know, you're just playing a DS game using the 3DS's DS mode. Also, this game never came out in North America, not even in Canada. And that's weird because we sometimes get weird stuff that the States doesn't get. It was clearly never intended to come out here either, since Nintendo never ever even sent it in to get an ESRB rating. This one was exclusive to just Japan and PAL territories. What the hell is a Zero? It's a shame we never got this title here, because along with just being a fascinating part of both gaming and Pokemon history, it has some really cool unique quirks. For example, the cartridge for this game is the only Nintendo DS game to have Bluetooth capabilities. In fact, this game comes bundled with a Bluetooth keyboard, and that's what I like to call weird and retro. So with that, welcome to Stuff We Play, home of everything weird and retro, and today we're talking about why Pokemon Typing Adventure is actually pretty awesome. This is by far the biggest box for any DS game that I've ever seen. It's about the same size as 2.5 regular Nintendo DS cases put side to side, and is about as thick as two of them stacked on top of each other. Honestly, I'm not sure why this thing exists, other than the fact that putting the word Pokemon on anything is a good way to make a crap ton of money. I think developer Genius Sonority knew that pretty well by the time they made this. After all, these were the same folks behind the incredible Pokemon Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness for the GameCube. If anyone was going to make a weird Pokemon spinoff and actually have it be pretty good, it was going to be them. Besides, this wasn't the first time there was a typing tutor based off of a Nintendo property. Back in the 90s, there was Mario Teaches Typing for DOS.
Welcome to Mario Teaches Typing!
The less said about that one, the better. So I got my copy here from a Japanese eBay seller for around 20 CAD. And as you can see, it's absolutely immaculate, save for this tear on the opening flap. Opening it up, we'll see that it contains 3 different items. First, we have the game itself and a standard DS case, which even includes a full color manual. Second off, we have a stand to prop up your DS console with. It can be adjusted to a few different angles, and it even has a slot in it to store a game cartridge. It kind of reminds me of the 3DS stand that would later come with Kid Icarus Uprising. And finally, of course, we have the Nintendo branded Pokémon Typing Adventure Bluetooth keyboard itself. This here is a standard Bluetooth keyboard. That may seem odd, as the DS lacked any native Bluetooth capabilities, but part of what makes this game so special is that there's a Bluetooth receiver built into the cartridge. In theory, that means you can get any standard Bluetooth keyboard to work with this game, though I was unable to figure out how to pair any keyboards besides the one that came bundled with it. I don't understand Japanese, and in the process of stumbling through the menus to try to figure out how to pair a different keyboard, I accidentally deleted my test save file. Whoops. Let's talk about this keyboard itself. The keys aren't the best I've ever used, but they're quite good for standard Bluetooth keyboard fare. It also feels quite sturdy, and is very obviously quite high quality. The team behind this keyboard likely knew that many of the folks playing this game would be kids, and as such, the keyboard itself feels sufficiently kid-proof. Surprisingly though, it's still a decent size. It's actually bigger than the Bluetooth keyboard I regularly use on my personal tablet, and that's quite welcome. However, unlike most modern Bluetooth keyboards, it does not have a rechargeable battery. Instead, it's powered by two AA batteries. This, along with the all-white plastic, really reminds me of the Apple Magic Keyboard, if said keyboard was made using the same design philosophy of the eMac. Anyways, that's enough about the keyboard. Let's dive in and find out if Mavis Beacon Catches Pokémon is any good. But first, a small disclaimer. Like in my Sonic Leapster video, all the footage you'll see of this game will be caught from a camera instead of through emulation. That's because, well, A, I don't own a DS or 3DS capture card, and B, it's actually incredibly difficult to emulate this game. If you boot up a ROM of this game in an emulator such as Mewmore, it'll give you an error due to being unable to detect a Bluetooth keyboard. Seriously, you'll get this black screen and won't be able to go any farther. Now, of course, being a Pokemon game, a remedy for this did come shortly after their original release. A couple of dedicated fans made a ROM patch that allowed for the game to just let you use a computer keyboard if you were playing it through your emulator of choice. Unfortunately though, it seems that the links to those ROM patches are long gone. I'll go ahead and say it, if you want to play this one, you're best off just getting an actual copy of the game. On to the game itself. You start it up, and it looks for a paired keyboard. From there, you're then greeted with the main menu. I pick an option that I assume is new game, name my character, and then I'm off, going through some cutscenes that I can't understand. According to Bulbapedia, the plot here is that you're a trainer in what I'm assuming is the US-inspired Unova region, and you've just joined the Elite Typist Club. This is a team of Pokemon researchers that investigates Pokemon by, you guessed it, typing in their names on a keyboard. They've also developed a special Pokeball that's used exclusively in this game called the Typing Ball. Throughout your journey, you'll work with the esteemed Professor Quentin Wordy and your friendly rival, Page Down. As you can see, this game loves its really bad typing puns, and I'm absolutely here for it. Well, in the European release anyways. In the Japanese version here, these characters are actually known as Kyuchi Fiji and Aobo Ki, respectively, and I'm sorry if I butchered that. Your goal is still the same though. Improve your typing skills by typing Pokemon names to catch all the Pokemon and become a Pokemon typing master. Also, side note, of the 649 Pokemon available in Generation 5, 403 of them are catchable in this game. When it comes to the actual gameplay here, well, it really is like a more kid-friendly Pokemon-themed equivalent to the Typing of the Dead. You have a world map laid out on an actual keyboard, with each key being assigned a different level. Within each level, most of the time, you'll have Pokemon come towards you, and you'll have to type in their names as fast as possible, with as few mistakes as possible, to hopefully catch them and add them to your Pokedex. The more levels you complete, the more you unlock, with some levels unlocking multiple other levels. Even though each level is essentially just a linear hallway that's only broken up by the occasional simple typing puzzle or boss fight, this unlock method leads to the game feeling rewarding and like it has some sense of non-linearity to it. You also have a home area, which is essentially just a place for you to save your game, and a list of what I assume are challenge missions. It's all really easy to understand for the most part, even with the language barrier, and the graphical style here, much like the mainline Generation 5 Pokemon games, has held up incredibly well. I love how the levels are all rendered in 3D, but have a rolling log effect like in Animal Crossing. But the Pokemon themselves are rendered as sprites, but instead of clashing, the two graphical styles here seem to complement one another. Unexpectedly, this game can actually get pretty challenging. It takes a bit of time for the difficulty to get there, but if you want to get perfect gold medals on every single stage, you may have to replay a good chunk of them. Most of the boss fights here aren't too bad, even if it's still really neat to fight Pokemon such as Groudon or Cobalion pretty early on. Some of the actual stages, though, put up a pretty good fight. As this is the Japanese version of the game, all of the Pokemon names here are Romanized versions of their Japanese names. As I'm unfamiliar with these versions of most of these names, along with some Japanese naming conventions such as some Pokemon names having dashes in them, the game ended up feeling more difficult for me than I imagine it would for a native Japanese speaker. And I think that's a good thing. I legitimately think that my typing skills improved from playing this game. Perhaps as a nice bonus, thanks to parts of this game being voice acted, I feel like I've actually been able to pick up some basic bits and pieces of Japanese. Plus, there's some challenge missions that outright remove the Latin letters, and you just have to spell out the corresponding Japanese letter, but I'm nowhere close enough to being able to get through those. Pokémon Typing Adventure absolutely succeeds as a typing tutor. Like the typing of the dead, it makes something that could be mundane, repetitive, and, through a charming visual style and legitimate challenge, makes it a lot of fun. While I think that most interested Pokemon fans may want to pick up the English language version, for the Pokemon fan with an interest in learning bits of Japanese pronunciation and spelling, the Japanese version is a must-have. I went into this game expecting it to be a weird yet cute novelty, but I ended up playing a wonderfully crafted piece of edutainment software. But with that, that's it for today's video on Pokémon Typing Adventure. Now originally, I wasn't going to be doing this video until 2020, and today's video is instead going to be a compare and contrast between Pokémon Sword and Shield and the retro Pokémon-inspired indie game, Disc Creatures. But I decided against that for a couple of reasons. Well, 3 reasons actually. Number 1, I really enjoyed Pokémon Sword, but I ultimately felt it wasn't worth full price. I guess you can say I feel kind of conflicted on it. Honestly, if I ever do a video or a podcast or a written review or something on it, it will be a good while from now, after I've had time to really think and reflect on my thoughts. I've never felt so mixed about a Pokemon game before, and it's kind of odd. Number 2, Disc Creatures is an incredible Pokemon-like indie game made by one guy, but there have been reports that publisher Dangen has not been honoring payment contracts with some indie devs. As such, I figured it'd be best to not discuss that title until that's all hopefully been resolved. Number 3, I've really wanted to talk about this game for a while now, and let's be real, as cool as those other games are, this is much more on brand for me. So with that, thank you very much for watching this video about Pokémon Typing Adventure. Are there any weird DS games or peripherals you'd want me to take a look at in the future? Maybe stuff like the Wappy Dog or the DS Piano? Let me know down in the comment section below. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to Stuff We Play for more great content like this, or if you want some exclusive perks and stuff, even back us on Patreon. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to some of our awesome patrons. That of course is Justin Chipman, The Golden Bolt, Dylan Ola, and Robert and Abby Hornibrook. Seriously, y'all are awesome. Now finally, before we end off, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the whole COPPA ruling and that affecting content, especially content like this involving games that I think were mostly advertised at children. And I just want to be sure that we're all on the same page that this channel is not aimed at kids. But I figured, how do I really get this across to people? So I figured I need to show something in this video that's tame enough that I don't get demonetized, but is still weird enough that at least a few people could get off to it. And that, of course, is this picture of Patrick Stewart dressed as a lobster, relaxing in a bathtub. Stay classy, y'all.